What is going on, mighty men of God, warriors, gunfighters? What are we going to talk about today? How about we talk about Air Force survival rifles, Aircrew and aircraft survival rifles? So if that interests you, stay tuned to today's episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting tactics, survival the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Now on that, I've been reluctant. I've had this on my mind to do as a topic for a long time, but I haven't because, if you've heard my bio before, I've served in two branches of the armed forces, law enforcement, a lot of experience in the gun and gunfighting world. I am not a pilot. I'm not a professional pilot. I wasn't a military pilot. I'm not a civilian pilot. Although I've flown on quite a bit of military transport, I have never been a pilot. So I want you to keep that in mind. I want to misrepresent myself here. With that, I'm going to put in the bio so you know what experience I do have. I'll do a real rapid fire one since I'm kind of adding to it now. I'll do a rapid fire version of the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic: aircraft, aircrew, survival guns. Blessed to have served in the military, law enforcement, combat veteran, private contractor, competition shooter, lifelong hunter, guide. Blessed by God that He got me through all those things so I could share this firsthand training, knowledge, experience with you to serve you today. Let's dive into the podcast. Okay, a couple of other quick caveats here. I'm going to talk mostly about, unless I get down a rabbit hole, American survival firearms for aircraft and fairly modern ones. And I'm talking about issued stuff, not this one time there was this one guy that carried a 357 Magnum Smith & Wesson and he was a pilot. Like, issued fairly modern American aircrew survival rifles. Yes, the German Drillings African survival rifle combo gun, really cool. Not really what we're going to talk about today. With that, where to start? How about we talk about some of these 20th century getting into 21st century survival guns. That'll give some of my thoughts and what I would pick. Let's talk about the M4 survival rifle. Not the gospel, so I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but Wikipedia. M4 survival rifle is a .22 caliber bolt-action rifle developed after World War II as a part of the survival gear stored under the seat of American military aircraft. It was designed to give downed aircrew a survival weapon for foraging wild game for food. 1949 to 1952 produced, and I don't know when they stopped using it in aircraft. This is interesting, maybe a sign of the times, as many of these are reflections of the sign of the times. .22 Hornet. And this is a really cool looking rifle if I will describe it for you here. It is a collapsing wire stock, very, very bare bones, like rudimentary. Picture if you took a bolt action rifle like a 700, a Winchester Model 70. Imagine if you took one of those, shrunk it down to .22 Hornet, took it out of its stock, and replaced the stock with a big folded piece of wire. Like a bare bones bolt action .22 Hornet. Now I think this is cool. Bolt action, so more than a single shot. I like that reasonable rate of fire. .22 Hornet. .22 Hornet doesn't get a lot of love today. It's kind of maligned. But .22 Hornet was like one of the OG high velocity, yes, high velocity compared to .22 rimfires. .22 Hornet, high velocity, .22 rounds. It's a good round that's kind of been forgotten. I've done a whole episode on the .22 Hornet, but just to give you an idea, just round numbers in my head, I'm not going to look it up for the .22 long rifle. You're talking 36 grain bullet at 1,200 feet a second. This you're looking at, it gives a 35 grain VMAX at 30,000 feet a second, and it gives a 40 grain at 2826. Goes all the way up to a 55 grain for the 22 Hornet listed on Wikipedia at 2650. That is not a little step up from the 22 long rifle or even the 22 Magnum. It is a considerable step up in power. You got to remember, the 223 reigns supreme today as far as common high velocity 22s, but that wasn't the case in the 40s. The AR-10, later to become the AR-15, later to become the M16, later to become the M4, wasn't even around. Wasn't even a thing. Certainly wasn't converted to the 223 to become the 5.56. 22 Hornet was not a horrible choice for this. It was a pretty cool choice. A bolt-action 22 Hornet, decent usable iron sights, not the worst thing in the world. Some advantages are that the ammunition is light. It's got a really good power to weight ratio. It's still a center fire, so it's not like a 22 Magnum where you have to worry about the less reliable attributes of 22 rimfire. And you got to think, these are not just guys that are going to the sporting goods store, going to Walmart, taking a box of ammo to their indoor range and shooting it and being like, oh, this gun's reliable. These are put in aircraft in all kinds of environmental conditions. Who knows how long they're going to be stored before they get shot, so I think a center fire round makes a lot of sense here. And as far as power to weight ratio goes, it's quite a bit of power without a lot of weight of ammo. That is a pretty cool Aircrew survival gun. Little side note here, manufactured by Harrington and Richards. And it lists a weight here of 4 pounds. Now let's look at the M6. I don't know what happened to the M5. Let's look at the M6. Aircrew survival weapon. The M6 Aircrew survival weapon was a specially made 22 Hornet over 410 bore. Interesting. Still with the 22 Hornet, but over a 410 bore. Combination gun issued by the United States Air Force Aircrews to help forage for food in the event of a plane crash. It was issued from 1952 until early 1970s in conjunction with the M4 survival rifle. This says it was not replaced until 2018 by the Gall A5, which we'll talk about later. This is me interjecting here. This is a very interesting rifle. It gives a weight of 4.5 pounds, a little bit heavier. You get 2 calibers. Some interesting notes about this: you carry extra ammo in the buttstock, which is really cool. It's got a really it's got the ergonomics that would make a Glock feel good about itself. If the Glock was ever self-conscious about its horrible ergonomics and it looked at this combination gun, it would say, whew, at least I'm not that thing. Right? It's got no forend. You just grab onto the barrels or onto the barrel where the barrel joins the receiver. Now, granted, this is a single shot over single shot, like combo gun, so it's not like it's got a high rate of fire. I don't think you're worried about it getting so hot you can't grab it. There's probably not enough ammo on board to do that. But you're just grabbing it on the barrel. Also, the stock is just like a metal housing, like I don't know if it's stamped or whatever, but just a metal housing. It's a little bit more than a wire stock. And the trigger, instead of a conventional trigger with like a trigger guard and a trigger that hangs down, it's like some kind of crude piece of metal that hangs down from the bottom of the stock that I assume you squeeze and make the gun go off. It also has a hammer. It is not going to win any beauty contest. It's quite the abomination when it comes to looks and ergonomics, but it looks like it would get the job done. The 22 Hornet over 410 bore shotgun, this is me talking here, I think that makes a lot of sense for this application. 22 Hornet over 410 bore shotgun. You get that same light ammo with the 22 Hornet. Now, of the shotguns, of the common shotgun gauges, and I know 410 is a bore, not a gauge, but of the common shotgun variants, 410 is the lightest in ammo, and it gives you quite a range. Not to the extent of a 20 or a 12 gauge. However, a 410 Bernanke slug is nothing to sneeze at, and a 410 birdshot is nothing to sneeze at when it comes to hunting small game. You might think, why would you need that when you have the 22 Hornet? Well, if you're out shooting birds on the wing or waterfowl or things like that, that makes a lot of sense. There's also buckshot for the 410 if you had to use it for defense. Not great, but it's something. Just like the larger gauges, the 410 will give you quite a bit of versatility. So it makes a lot of sense here. I like it. I don't like it. It's a single shot over single shot. I don't really know if I would take this over a reasonable rate of fire bolt action 22 Hornet. I guess it would depend on where I was going to crash, and if I was going to crash, I would try not to. So there's that. Again, I'm not a pilot, but I do like the versatility of the 410. I'm not crazy about a single shot over a single shot. Let's see some other notes here. I mentioned 4.5 pounds. It does in fact here say the M6 is made of stamped sheet metal with a forged steel removable barrel assembly. A storage compartment in the stock held 9 rounds of 22 Hornet ammunition and 4 shotgun shells. A firing pin selector allowed the shooter to choose which barrel would be fired. This is interesting because most bomber crews operated in Arctic region during the Cold War. A trigger bar was used that could be depressed while wearing mittens, as opposed to a conventional trigger. That's pretty interesting. A little side note here for you guys that like the AR-15 platform and the M16 platform. You may notice on the military mil-spec ones, there's a straight just metal bar on the bottom of the trigger guard. The back part of that is a roll pin. The front part of that has a little dimple in it. It's meant so that you can push that in with the tip of a bullet and swing that down. Why would you want to get rid of the trigger guard? For the same reason, so you can, in really cold environments, pull the trigger of the AR-15 with mittens on. It was designed like that for a reason. So just be mindful of that. If you live in a cold environment and you're going to replace it with one of the more Gucci looking, monolithic lowers or one of the more Gucci looking trigger guards. I'm not telling you not to. I'm just telling you that the military one on the M16 was well thought out for a reason. Okay, rabbit hole over. Now there's one we must talk about, the Armalite AR-7. That's the next one we're going to talk about in this. Let's go to the wiki and see what it has to say. The Armalite AR-7 Explorer is a semi-automatic firearm 22 long rifle caliber developed in 1959 from the AR-5 that was adopted by the U.S. Air Force as a pilot and aircrew survival weapon. The AR-7 was adopted and modified by an Israeli Air Force as an aircrew survival weapon in the 1980s. The AR-7 was designed by American firearms designer Eugene Stoner. You might recognize that name from the AR-15, later to become the M16 and the M4. All right, we'll probably come back to the wiki later, but let me interject here. Unlike the survival gun weapons we've heretofore talked about, this is a semi-automatic. It is a semi-automatic 22 long rifle. Very lightweight. If we look at the weight, 2.5 pounds. Cha-ching. That is a moneymaker right there. One, because the gun itself is light, and two, because the ammunition is super light. So you could carry a lot of 22 long rifle and a 2.5 pound gun and still be under the weight of those aforementioned aircrew survival weapons. Really, really cool there. I like the idea of a semi-automatic 22. Semi-automatic 22, although it's only a 22 long rifle, collectively lets you lay down more firepower in a short amount of time than a single shot or a bolt action rifle. Right, there's a reason we don't send infantrymen into war with a bolt action rifle. And I love bolt action rifles, but that's not what they're for. Now, getting into some history, it says here that it was developed from the AR-5, which we might briefly talk about, which was basically this gun in a bolt action. I'm briefly going to mention the AR-5 here because it says it was actually adopted in '56 for a new airplane, and it was canceled because of the cancellation of that aircraft. And it says the Air Force never bought more than the original 12 test models of the AR-5. But it kind of looks like the AR-7, but it's a bolt-action 22 Hornet. Now getting back to the AR-7, very, very lightweight 22 long rifle, very common ammo around the world. Right? It's one of those rounds that is likely to be found around the world. 22 long rifle, from South America to Europe to And almost anywhere you're going to find 22 long rifle if you can find ammo at all. Some notable features of this gun: it's super lightweight. The barrel unscrews and you can put the entire thing, the receiver and everything, into the stock and you can seal it. I've heard that it's not exactly watertight, but it will float for a short period of time. That seems pretty handy, as most of the Earth's surface is water, and you're talking about an airplane designed for a downed aircrew. Or rather, you're talking about a firearm designed for a downed aircrew. Makes a lot of sense that it would float. Makes a lot of sense that it's light. Makes a lot of sense that it's semi-automatic. Really, really cool. Some things on this is one of the ones that you can easily still get. Not the exact same model. Like if you're a collector, you want the original AR-7 survival rifle from Armalite. However, you can still get one made by Henry. There's one at the closest Walmart to my house. I see it when I walk in there. It's either that one or one closest to my work. Or both. But I see it all the time when I go in there and I'm like, oh, I kind of want to get that. But I kind of don't as well because I'm not a pilot. Right? I don't have those same parameters. But they are still available. From what I hear, they're decent rifles. They're not meant to take the place of a Ruger 1022 for like a long lifetime of hard shooting. These were not designed to be like a post-apocalyptic survival tool. There's a difference between an acute survival scenario and a chronic survival scenario. Acute meaning your airplane has gone down. For you, the peanut butter and chocolate has hit the fan. But for everybody else, life goes on as normal. So you only have to have a firearm to get you from that situation back to normal, which should be a fairly acute, short-term scenario. A chronic scenario, meaning like the world has changed drastically and you need a firearm to procure food and or stop threats, that's going to have to last a long, long time of hard abuse and low maintenance. That's a completely different set of parameters. So beware that you're not trying to force a square peg into a round hole, thinking that one of these, because they were designed by the Air Force for an aircrew survival weapon, would be the best for some kind of post-apocalyptic scenario. You know, for a backcountry canoe trip, for a backcountry backpacking trip, where you're not planning on staying out there for 6 months, but you might get lost and have to stay out there longer than you need to and procure food. For something like that, they make sense because it's a similar acute survival scenario. Things are normal. There's still, the flow of electricity in modern society. And you just have to get back to it. That's different than the complete collapse of society as we know it going into a new dark age. So just be aware of that. Now, there is the CAR 15 GAU variant that was used. This is actually one I had a very similar model, if not this model, in a specialized role in law enforcement. Very simple, very basic AR-15 with, the old school M16A1 style sights. It was short, it was handy. I really liked that gun in law enforcement. Mine was full auto. It was a good gun. It was dependable. Old Colt manufacturer. We see this adopted like during the Vietnam era. I'm going to read. This is from Wiki. The CAR 15 survival rifle was meant for use by downed aircrew. Because of the CAR 15's modular design, the survival rifle could break down into two sub-assemblies and stowed with 420 round magazines in a pilot's seat pack, resembling a Colt Commando. It was a 10-inch barrel. If you want to think about it like a very shortened version of a Colt M16A1, but a very short SBR version of that. And of course, the military need not worry about the silly laws of SBRs like civilians do. Which brings me to the one we're going to talk about now, the brand new Aircrew survival firearm. So new that I could not find a wiki article on it. I wish that I could to keep it straight across the board, but it's such a new adoption that I can't find it. This is from sandbox.com, of which I'm not aware I've ever read anything from them before, so take this with a grain of salt. By the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter is established. But it talks, the best one I could find in the research for now, the GAU-5A. This is, and again, this is per sandbox.com, The weapon needed to be small enough to fit under the ejection seat, but it also needed to be lightweight and hit a man-sized target within 200 meters. Downed pilots are still combatants and need a combat-capable rifle. Something like the M6 rifle just wouldn't do. This creates a challenge, but not an impossible one. Looking over the specs and features of a GAW 5A shows that the Airforce custom gun shop met its goal and style. The Army... Okay, this talks about prefixes and suffixes. Not really important here. The Airforce went slightly shorter with a 12.5-inch barrel. The longer barrel, the more velocity. I don't think I have to explain that. The velocity with issue projectile still tops 2,600 feet per second, which does allow for fragmentation on soft target. Says them. This barrel also made hits at 200 meters, lethal and feasible. Iron sights only. Now, this is me interjecting here. This is basically a takedown AR pistol. If it was civilian terms, it would be a pistol. We would just put a pistol brace on it. In fact, there's a variant you can buy. I might talk about at the end. But basically, this gun, again, military doesn't have to worry about SBR. It's basically what you would consider an AR pistol with a proper buttstock, an M4 style buttstock, that takes down at the receiver. I don't really... Maybe I'm not familiar with having to fit things in an ejection seat. But the AR is already a takedown variant because you just take the two pins out of any regular AR M16 and the gun breaks in half. This one, however, instead of breaking, just taking the pins out, it has some kind of apparatus where it screws, locks, some kind of takedown mechanism. It reminds me, it probably doesn't work the same way, but it reminds me of the Ruger 1022 takedown where the barrel screws into the receiver. And it basically takes down that way. And it has a swing back pistol grip to make it smaller. It's basically a takedown AR pistol, for lack of a better term. And this is from the Firearms blog. I did know that they made a variant that was civilian legal. It basically is, I don't know about all the specs, like if it's the same finish and all that, but it basically looks very much the same as the Airforce survival rifle, except instead of a stock, it has a pistol brace. Big deal. Doesn't really matter functionally, but it's basically that. Midwest Industries launches clone of USAF new survival rifle, the GAW 5A. Alright, I'm going to talk a little bit wax philosophical on you here. What this speaks to me more about the development of these survival guns from the M4 to the GAW 5A. It seems to me that not that long ago, it was kind of expected that an American man, especially one that was going to join the military, would likely know how to hunt. A lot of those earlier survival rifles, the first several we talked about, were mostly designed for food procurement in mind. Meaning that you would think that the pilot would have some idea how to handle himself in the bush. These later variants we see are basically AR-15s. And what gets me about this is that I think the average American man today, maybe the only gun he's ever fired is on a video game. Right? And if he joins the military, maybe the only gun he's familiar with, other than other guns that he's issued in the military, is going to be an AR-15 variant. Maybe the only long gun he's ever shot in his whole life is some AR-15 variant, an M16, A2, A4, M4, it's some variant of that rifle. And that's all he knows. Right? He could spend 20 years in the military and that might be the only long gun he ever fires. And he may have never hunted a day in his life. This speaks more to me about a cultural shift in America than the minor differences in Aircrew survival rifles. I'd like to think that we could get back to a nation of hunters. And I would like to think that we would teach pilots to hunt. But maybe that's a bridge too far. But I just wanted to... Out of all these variants, and I love guns and I'm a gun nerd, but that spoke to me about the cultural shift in America more than the sub-variants of the survival rifles themselves. Now, what if I were picking this? Now, granted, I am not a pilot. One of the side tangents in my career I've often thought about, and I don't regret the decision that I made, but I mentioned I served in 2 branches of the armed forces. When I was in the Army, I was a sergeant, and they were looking for, people with good records and everything to go be warrant officers to fly A-10s. They were in need of A-10 pilots, and they offered it to me, and I turned it down. And I don't regret that, right? I like being infantry. I like being a ground pounder. I want to experience the world in person, not through a glass windshield. If I have to destroy an enemy, I want to do it face to face, mano a mano, so to speak. I don't want to do it over a joystick and through glass. That's not to take anything away from pilots. Their skills and everything else is incredible. That's just not my style. I am not a pilot, is the point that I'm trying to get across to you. Even when I was offered it, I turned it down. I did not want to be a pilot. If I was going to be a pilot, though, I'm going to tell you that A-10, if there was ever an aircraft to tempt me, the A-10 is it, because it's an awesome aircraft. Either way, I turned it down, and I don't regret it. But I often think about, what if I'd have gone in to be a warrant officer for an A-10? That said, not a pilot, and here's the deal. Pilots, getting to what I was talking about, I was infantry. That was my primary in both branches. Infantry and pilots are different. Infantry is meant to go toe-to-toe with the enemy. Per the U.S. Marine Corps, I still remember it, what is the mission of the Marine Corps Rifle Squad? To locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver, or to repel an enemy assault by fire and close combat. Right? Any Marine Corps infantryman worth his salt will tell you that. Locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver. That's the mission of the Marine Corps Rifle Squad. That is not the mission of a downed pilot. The mission of a downed pilot, his primary weapon is now destroyed. His general thing now is escape and evasion. That is his primary mission now. Different mission parameters. He's not meant to be a primary combatant. In fact, I'm not a SEER instructor. I never went to SEER because I'm not a pilot, but actually at my job now, without giving too much away, one of the guys that was around recently, he was a SEER instructor, and I was talking to him, and one of my very good friends worked at a SEER place for quite a while. I've never done it in person, but I'm familiar with the concept, and they teach escape and evasion. They don't teach, bayonet thrusts. They don't teach, as far as I'm aware, like hardcore hand-to-hand combat. They teach escape and evasion. Escape and evasion is the name of the game. It's curious to me that these new survival rifles are AR-15 variants. Maybe it's just because, again, that's all people are ever familiar with, and that's all a lot of these new generation of military men have ever done. Not all of them. There's some good old boys and some good old Wyoming cowboys and stuff too that still join the military. But a lot of people today grow up in cities and suburbs, and they've never fired a gun. And the only gun they've ever fired is an AR-15. So if you're going to give them a rifle in their aircraft, it makes sense to make it an AR. I get that. That said, it seems to me if you're a pilot and your aircraft is downed, a lot of things have gone wrong. Perhaps you decide at that point, what I want to do is go out in a blaze of glory and just, get into a gunfight with my takedown AR pistol. Okay, that's a fantastic choice for you. If that's the right choice at the time and you've prayed about it and that's what you're going to do, good to go. If your goal is escape and evasion, though, that AR-15, the 223, is not a very good hunting tool. And I know people hunt with it, and I know people take a deer with it, and I've done quite a bit of hunting with it. It's not a great hunting tool. I say that as somebody that's been a guide, that's been a lifelong hunter. It would not be on my top 10 list of good hunting implements or good food procurement instruments. So if I was going to stick with the escape and evasion philosophy, what would I pick? Okay, the first answer is going to be a very boring answer. The first answer I'm going to give is going to be a very slightly modified Mossberg 500 410. I'd give it a better finish rate. I'd give it a Cerakote or something like it. I would give it the lightest polymer stock I could. Maybe even trim out some of the stock and make it hold ammo. I would cut down the barrel because, again, if you're in the military, you don't have to worry about the silly SBR rules. But a Mossberg 500 410. For I imagine the same reason they chose the 410 for the older versions of the survival rifle. The ammo is lightweight. It's very flexible. You could get some birdshot. You could get some buckshot. There's a lot of defensive loads now available, especially with the advent of a lot of those 410 revolvers, of which I'm not the biggest fan of. But it did give a lot of innovation in 410 defensive rounds. There's the disc rounds, fairly decent buckshot rounds, right? A real common 410 buckshot round is 5 balls of triple aught buck. That's nothing to sneeze at. I grew up hunting with a 410. I grew up hunting deer with a 410. I know 410 is capable. And a 410 Bernecke slug, in a 410 I'd take a Bernecke over a Foster. A 410 Bernecke slug at reasonable ranges is nothing to sneeze at for medium to large game. It wouldn't be my first pick for that, but you're a lot more likely to come across small game, especially if you're Oscar Mike on the move, trying to get to a grid square so you can get rescued. So for that, I would probably pick a shortened down, cut the barrel down. A polymer stock's not going to weigh much anyway, so as long as it was good to go in the size department, I would just a plain polymer stock, cut the barrel down, and shotguns use pistol powder anyway, like your 700X, your 800X. They don't need a long barrel to attain decent velocity. Shotguns don't. The reason we have 18-inch shotguns in the civilian world is because of arbitrary laws. But if I could cut that down to the magazine tube, say a standard magazine tube of 5 rounds, and I could cut the barrel off flush with it, it would be much lighter weight than a regular variant. The Mossberg 500 already has a aluminum receiver, so you're good to go there. It's a very proven design. Cutting the barrel off of a pump shotgun should in no way hinder the performance or the reliability of said gun. I'd probably give it an improved cylinder choke because it's very versatile. I wouldn't worry about interchangeable chokes. It's just more weight. And a lot of the air crewmen, if they've never hunted, aren't going to know what chokes are anyway. To give it an improved cylinder choke does well with a variety of different loads, including slugs. I'd give it a 3-gun style of shotgun sight, meaning a rib with a front sight and a flip-up rear sight. So if you wanted to use it to shoot on the wing, shoot on the move, you could. And if you wanted to flip up the rear sight, you could do that as well. Again, I'd Cerakote it. I'd give an assortment of shot, birdshot, buckshot, slug. Very, very versatile tool there. It's also a reasonable rate of fire. And let's not forget that, a lot of these people are going to have a semi-automatic pistol. So you have that for a fighting implement. A SIG, a Beretta, it's a very capable firearm in and of itself. But if I had to have more firepower, a pump action 410 with buckshot or slugs would not be the worst thing in the world. And it's a reasonable rate of fire. You come across some waterfowl in a creek, in a pond, in a stream that you have to cross anyway, and you want some good high quality calories, you could lay down a few of those on the water, because we're not talking about sporting, we're talking about survival. A couple of rounds of number 6 shot quickly, that's a lot of food. Also, because of fish and game laws, we don't think of it today, but you come across some shallow streams and ponds, you can fish with a shotgun. It's a thing. It's not legal, but in a survival situation where you're going to die and you're in enemy territory anyway, fishing with a shotgun, let's just say, is a thing. So you got that versatility. That would be my first pick. A lightweight polymer stock, hollow, probably with a removable recoil pad so you could put the ammo inside the stock to save space. Fill it with a good assortment of buckshot, birdshot, and slugs. Cut the barrel off at the end of the magazine tube, whatever that is, 12 and a half inches. Cerakote it, and that's a pretty good gun, I think, in my opinion. Now, the other one is going to be kind of a totally different direction. If you wanted to stick with this, talking about the power to weight ratio, the 22 long rifle, 22 Magnum, those are good rounds, but they're rimfire, and as we already talked about, they are not as reliable as a centerfire cartridge. That's the reason pretty much the only ones we still see are 22 and very small calibers, right? The centerfire is a better design. Of the ones available, to not have to reinvent the wheel, the 5.7 by 28. It was designed as a PDW round. Now, it's not great for food procurement and most of its loadings, but that could easily be fixed with a full metal jacket bullet. You could just give it a simple full metal jacket bullet. It's not so powerful that if the round doesn't expand, it's going to do a ton of damage. I would give an assortment of some full metal jacket rounds and some really good, better terminal performance rounds. If you did have to get into an altercation, you can carry a lot of 5.7 ammo, and it's very light. So it seems like a decent choice. Again, this is my second choice, but if you said it's got to be a rifle for some reason, or I want more combat capability, give me a short handy, something like a CMMG Banshee or something else, style, unconventional style pistol, meaning like a braced pistol. Since this was designed to go into a PDW and or a handgun, a really short barrel, 7 to 9 inches, AR-7, 20 to 30 round magazines, a clearly marked different color magazines, red and green or something like that, or yellow and red for less power, more power as far as performance on target, and a very simple kind of radial delayed blowback design like the Banshee, or a straight blowback design, a very simple, robust design, 5.7 PCC. Lightweight. Heck, you could, the sub 2K, they have a 5.7 variant of it now. It's already light. If you don't have to worry about the barrel length, cut it down. Give it a better barrel, meaning like a chrome-lined hammer forged barrel that's not just blued steel that's going to get rusty, because who knows how long it's going to have to go without maintenance. But a cold hammer forged chrome lined barrel on a, let's say 7 to 9 inch barrel on a foldable gun like that, super lightweight. They're super lightweight anyway. With 20 round mags, that's reliable. With different ammunition that shoots the same, you would design this yourself, right? So it shoots the same point of aim, point of impact. It's zeroed for, let's say 50 to 200 meters. And you have full metal jacket rounds, and you have some good terminal performance rounds, whether they be solid copper monolithic hollow points or some kind of varmint round or something like that, right? So you have the better terminal performance if you want it, but you also have the ability to take small game without completely destroying it with the hollow point rounds that don't expand. And you could probably figure that out and do some testing on that. That would be, not that hard to accomplish. And I would maybe see what could be a lightweight, already proven design that could be shortened easily, like a cold hammer forged chrome lined barrel shortened to 7 to 9 inches on a sub 2K, or a CMMG Banshee lightened up in any way that you could get it, and in a 5.7 with 20 to 30 round mags. That would not be a bad choice either. And for all those people that have never shot anything but an AR-15, if you went like the CMMG Banshee route, it would be a similar design to that. And I don't think that even should be a criteria, right? You pilots are not stupid people. So you could probably easily teach them how to use another gun in an afternoon. So I wouldn't really be a primary concern for me, but you could easily teach somebody to do that. But if you wanted to go the AR-15 route, something like the Banshee or something like it in a 5.7 makes a lot of sense for the lightweight versatility and the center fire reliability of that ammo. Those are just some thoughts. I'd love to hear some feedback from you guys. What would you pick as an aircrew survival weapon? Just some thoughts on that. And this is for military, right? If you're a civilian, you might have a smaller AO, a smaller area of operation. The Air Force, who knows where they're going to be operating. If you're an Alaska bush pilot, right, you have a much smaller AO, area of operation, than the United States Air Force, which is pretty much global, right? So if you're operating, as a Canadian and Alaska bush pilot, that's far different. If you're flying in South America, that's a different environment. You probably are going to tailor it to your environment. So I'd love to know what you think if you are a pilot or an air crewman. What would you pick? Love to hear from you. Anyway, with that, guys, your tactical tip of the day. Talking about the AR-15 and many other guns with a hollowed out pistol grip. Most of those are hollow. The U.S. military one is one of my least favorite. It has a one finger groove that never seems to line up with my fingers. But they make a lot of aftermarket ones, a lot of which have a cap on the bottom, which means you can store extra stuff in there. Your tip is store extra stuff in there. What kind of stuff? An extra firing pin retaining pin, which are easy to get lost, and then you got to make one out of a paper clip or something. Ask me how I know. So store an extra one or two of those in there. A little bit of extra CLP or something like it. There is room for some stuff in that pistol grip, so you might as well use it to store some stuff that you may need. That's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. This is from Psalm 147. He does not delight in the strength of the horse. He takes no pleasure in the legs of a man. The Lord takes pleasure in those who fear him, in those who hope in his mercy. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.